Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Advocacy Hour. Thank you so much for tuning in. I, of course, am joined by my co host, Rebecca Thomas, and we are so excited to have one of my favorite people that I have had the pleasure to get to know, Dr. Tamice Spencer-Helms, an author, a theologian, an activist, and also on the board for TNE. So thank you so much for joining me and Rebecca. Tamice, how are you guys doing today?
So
Doing
good and
good.
so
It is
excited that
good to be
Tamice is
here.
here. Yes.
I love it. I love it. All right, we're gonna dive in because we got a lot to talk about. And I know typically Rebecca and I talk the first half of the show, but I was like, no, Tamice is gonna be on. So we're gonna have Tamice the entire time because Tamice always drops knowledge and I always walk away from conversations feeling smarter and also like I need to read more. And I already consider myself
You and
pretty
me
well read,
both.
but Tamice makes me feel like, oh gosh, I need to get more books.
You and me
So
both.
just in the spirit of Black History Month, we've been talking about, last episode with Rebecca, we talked about anti-racism in the church. We talked about the difference between the Black church and the white church and white supremacy and all of that. But I want to talk a little bit about abolition from a faith-based perspective. And I know when people hear the word abolition, they may not know what that means, but it really just means to abolish a system and specifically from within. But I want to ask you first, Rebecca, when you hear the word abolition, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think probably, the same as what you're saying. Everybody thinks of, for me, I think of abolition of slavery. That is the first thing that always comes to my mind because I think that is where the word has been utilized the most in spaces that I've been in. So I love the reframe. It's actually just usually using the actual definition to
Right.
abolish a system. So I think this is a really important topic because I think probably most people that look similar to me probably have the same first thought when they hear that word. And so I think it's really good that we talk about the actual definition. What does it mean now? Yeah, so that's what comes to my mind. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Tamice.
Yeah, when I think about abolition, I think systems, we talked recently, Malynda, about this, but I think now I do still think systems, but I'm thinking nervous systems these days.
Mm.
And the ways that systems have been internalized in our bodies and in our minds, and that it's the infection of those systems that leads to everything else. So
Hmm.
I'm like really thinking about it in terms of not an either or, to kind of say like not whataboutism, but to say like what is the root cause of inequality. And like this morning I was spending time in meditation and prayer this morning, and like I was thinking about this question because I was thinking, you have to actually believe in equality. You actually
Mm.
have to believe in
Hmm.
it first
And a lot of
before you
people
can
don't,
have it.
sadly. A lot of
No, I mean
people don't.
really, when
And
you
we're
think
seeing
of
that.
it,
Yeah.
that's right. I mean, you do. You see competition and hierarchy and spite and stuff, and it's kind of like, yo, how are we fighting for equality? We don't know how to even have a conversation. Like, it doesn't,
Mm.
we have to. Where is the source of the equality going to come from? And
Right.
those are the questions I've been asking myself, really, because I think this is so where we are right now. It's just so wild, that like I'm like, okay, I really want to get to the bottom of this. Like, I don't want to settle, like you're saying, for reform. Like, how do we uproot this?
Yeah.
And I think it's really not even in a virtue signaling way, but in a really personal way. I'm like, oh, like I can see manifestations of some of these temptations and impulses in my own everyday life with my kids,
Yeah.
with my spouse. So I'm
Yeah.
really trying to like hit these things on a micro level, so that like I can have integrity when I try to deal with them on a macro level.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting when we're talking about specifically like breaking down the systems, getting rid of them, and then rebuilding them. I feel like a lot of people think when we say burn it all down that there is no plan to rebuild. It's just destruction altogether. And it's like, no, there actually is going to be accountability and there is going to be a rebirth of something new, but you have to break it down because, as you said, I'm all for abolition. I think we're past the point of reform at this point. I just think, like, I do think reform in theory is beautiful. And if we could actually all sit at the table and talk about how to reform these systems, how to reform the church as an institution, we could make a lot of progress. But the problem is that people don't want to have those conversations. There's a fear, and we can get into the whole fear thing in a second. But for me, I really think that we have to be very clear about when we do talk about abolishing the system, what's next. And I think specifically in Christian spaces and white evangelical Christian spaces, when they hear that word, they think everything that they have is going to be gone. And they don't think anything else is going to come from that. And they don't also know how to build coalitions with other people to build up. That's just from my perspective, but I'd love to hear what you all think.
Yeah, I think, just hearing what you're saying, I've noticed this on, I would say, threads a lot recently. Like something came to my mind, and I think to me, it's along the lines of what you're talking about. Not even being able to have a conversation and realizing the gatekeeping of truth that is happening that keeps people from being willing to even explore an idea that's different than their own. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the white American evangelical Christianity has the truth. They really, really believe that. So when we talk about abolishing something that to them is true, and they've been told it is the truth, and it is the only thing that is rooted in actual love and justice and all these things, it is like devastating to their nervous system, to Tamice's point. It's
Yeah.
devastating to life as they know it. And to undo those things is really hard. And it takes noticing on a micro level to figure those things out and how they impact us on a day-to-day basis. I think it is terrifying. And I had a conversation yesterday, I think, and somebody came at me a little bit, and they're like, well, what I'm telling you is rooted in love. And I was like, okay, so is what I'm telling you. Like,
Mm.
can we
Is
get
it?
so, and you know what, it diffused it, saying that, like, if we're really talking about love, you have to understand that I'm also coming from that space, and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe there can be a conversation. But we don't know how to have those conversations. To your point, Malynda, we'd have to be
Yeah.
able to sit at a table, and right now we can't.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
so interesting. I keep thinking about I've been writing my sermon for the conference, and one of the things I'm tapping into is like, where there is smoke, there is fire. And I think this idea of like, I'm saying this to you in love. To me, it's really important to see. I really love how Jesus gives this kind of a way to analyze reality, and he does it outside of the realm of morality. He does it in terms of fruit. He puts it in the natural realm, because it's not a power analysis if both of us bite an apple and it's rotten. If you're 40, if you're 4, you're going to spit it out. And
Mm.
so it really gives the authority back to you to say, if they call bad good, you're going to have to be okay with being called bad. So you've got to be
Mm.
able to judge a tree by its fruit and not be caught up in being perceived as good or called good by a system that can't recognize it. And so I think that's where this sort of in the nervous system, when you are in fight or flight, your whole ability to think critically shuts down. So it's like really getting to people to a place to think, does this make any sense? Like, does this make any sense to you, what we're doing? And it really, I love that about, and I think that's where we have to go, is people coming back to a place of like using your God-given agency and intuition to judge a tree by its fruit. And that Jesus gives you that permission.
Yeah.
And he says, in fact, that like that is actually exceeding the Pharisees' righteousness, right? Because it's not for show. It's coming from a place of, it's just your reaction to something rotten. So I think there's a way to like have these conversations of like, both of us can call this, the 4-year-old is not 40, the 40-year-old is not 4, but both of them can spit this apple out. And if we
Mm.
could galvanize around that, around what we can all agree on as rotten, and start there, that's obviously a really easy on ramp to having conversations, because at least you have that in common, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
we can't call the same thing a spade, then that's where we've got to do the work. We got to be able to call the
Yeah.
same thing a spade.
You know, it's interesting listening to you talk about this because you both know that I didn't grow up in the white evangelical church space, but I entered it and then immediately left. I was like, whoa. But hearing you speak about that, not being able to come to the agreement about like what is rotten and what is bad, what theological framework has been used to convince that certain people are and certain people aren't, and the people that aren't are the ones that are the white evangelicals? I just want to know that history a little bit, and I think it'll help also guide the rest of this conversation. But I just hearing that, I'm like, well, what has made them decide who is good and what is bad and all that? So you guys are the ones that grew up there. Educate me right now, please. Either one of
I
you.
don't
Well,
know, Rebecca.
yeah,
I would say purity culture. Like I think
that's
purity
a big
culture
one.
and the fear of contamination, and you can see that same the conversion idea, right? You have to go from bad to good. You have to go from dirty to clean. So whoever is doing the cleansing, whoever is renaming you has power. So when you think about white
Mm,
evangelicalism and the tentacles it has in our society, they have been in charge of naming things, which we now see was a farce. It was a whitewashed tomb. And so we have to go back to the drawing board and go, okay, how do I look at what I see in front of me and call it what it is? And I would even argue that say like the reason that people were drawn to Jesus in the first place is because they loved truth. And so you really are going to have to choose whether or not you're going to be honest about what you see and move accordingly. And I think
mm,
that contamination piece, um, we can even see losing friends and family as a way, we will get perceived as a contaminant to the purity of the community, right? And that whole idea of purity and contamination, of being damned or saved, that gets put onto actual bodies in the Americas. And so that's why it's so important to like keep repeat. I know y'all hear me talk about this so much, and I'm like, I have to keep repeating this because that's the root of it. You've got to deal
repetition, yeah.
with
No, you have to, yeah.
we this is the root of it. It is really like you've got to figure out what you're afraid of, and is
Hmm.
it worth being afraid of? And if
Hmm.
it isn't, where is the fear coming from? But you've got to be calm enough to critically think about that enough to not move in preemptive anxiety because you don't know what to do with the thing that you don't recognize or know, right? So I do think that it all is wound up. It is wound up in that same purity and contamination gets visited into social political reality in America. It's all one thing. It's all one logic. Is
Yeah,
stay
yeah.
clean from the contaminant, right? That's how I would view it.
Yeah, I think too, just add my own perspective on that and thinking of the labels of good and bad. Like the fact that we even use those labels is because
Yeah.
some group decided that we have to use those labels, and I have older kids that when they were younger, I would say that's good or that's bad. And with my
Mm.
youngest now, I don't say that. I say that's helpful. That may be harmful. That's a choice you're going to have to make, and you have to decide if you're willing to take on those consequences. But
I love
even
those
those
shifts.
words, good and bad, it's like, who decided that?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
some group in power, it's a way to maintain power. And we see this with these people that are in power right now. People have come online and they prayed a prayer. And so now Russell Brand is like a spokesperson for Christianity. That is wild because all he did was say a few things. But when we do look at the fruit, right, we're seeing there are these actions that have been atrocious that he hasn't been held accountable for yet. And yet he's still being put in this place where he's propped up as a beacon of goodness.
Mm,
And
mhm.
that is hard for me to handle as somebody
Yeah,
who is like, but that is bad. If we're going to use those words, like those words don't even have the same meaning. Our definitions are very
sure.
different.
Sure, sure. You know, I want to talk also because you said the word accountability, and that's obviously a big word that has been floating around probably for the last decade, at least with this administration, but specifically in the last, couple of months with everything that's happening. And I've always found it interesting that from a faith based perspective, we talk about grace and redemption and restoration, but none of our justice systems actually reflect that, especially if we're going to claim to be a Christian nation, which we're not, but I'm just talking about the claim, right? None of that actually happens in the justice system that we have. And also, there is no accountability. And always trying to understand how they can reconcile that while claiming to uphold these values that Jesus held so dearly. It's very frustrating for me.
Yeah.
It's because it's a, it's a loop.
Yeah.
It's a
Mm,
tautological loop. So it
Yeah.
feels like you're spinning your wheels because you are. The idea is to get off the ride. Get off
Mm,
the ride.
mm,
Like, this thing is insatiable, and so I think, even the constantly combating it, that's what it wants. You're still feeding it. I think what would happen if we were like, what's the world we want to build? Because I keep thinking about, right, like, I think Christianity comes into play with, like, people are longing for heaven, and they're longing for a place that has no suffering and no pain. And I think when I think about heaven, and I think about how it gets talked about and how it gets sort of the aesthetics of heaven that I see in scripture, it really is about a feeling. It's
mm.
about, think about the lion is laying down with the lamb, and everybody has their own vine and fig tree, and the place is beautiful, right? And it's about how heaven feels, right? And if Jesus is telling me that that kingdom of heaven is at hand, then I need to cultivate the fields, right?
mm.
So I need to be around people who value those things, value what it feels like in heaven, value what heaven reflects, and begin to, like, actually actualize that, right? Instead of waiting
Yeah.
on it to come down, live it, produce it, um, you know, like, actually manifest it.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are you doing in your home that reminds us of the feeling of heaven?
Yeah.
Which is where you can have no shame, and you can have belonging and connection, and your needs are being met. That's not a whole
Yeah.
lot to ask,
It's not. It's
actually.
not.
And we
Yeah.
can
It's really
co-create
not.
that, like you're saying, manifesting it in these spaces. Um, I was thinking about this a little bit earlier too. I lost my job earlier at the end of last year, and the system of that, the feelings, the anxiety of that, have continued to live in my body. But more than that, it's the system of just having to have a job that is at a place that is worried about money and doesn't really care about people and all that. All of that lives in my body, and I'm just now starting to feel different, where I can feel a difference being away from it, getting outside of it, focusing more on what I'm creating in the space where I am. That is where, like, all of this really good work is starting to happen. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to me, is like
Mhm.
that, paying attention to what's in our bodies. And yes, can some people do that work while they're still in the system? Yeah, I think a few. But for most of us, it means that has to go away, because it's
Yeah.
really hard to create those things if we can't be in a place that is calm and peaceful and not an activated nervous system. That doesn't serve anyone.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and, we can start that in our homes, and then it gets to come out from there.
Mm.
Yeah, but make no mistake, right? Like, I feel like a lot of times when these conversations get had, people think it's about escapism, and it's not. Jesus
Mm.
flipped
No.
that table with a regulated nervous system. Jesus
Yes.
flipped that table with a regulated nervous system. Okay? The stillness itself is potent enough to transfigure a body, right? That's what happens in the Gospels. That man goes to the mountain and spends some time alone, and his body's transfigured. And I
Mm.
think that when we speak of stillness and having practices, it's not about escapism. It's actually
Sure.
Right.
about being present to the reality that we live in, and
Yeah.
knowing that the source that we push against that with is not coming from the place. That's what Audre Lorde says. The master's tools
Mm.
can't dismantle the house. And Jesus says it another way. He says, you have to bind the strong man before you enter his house. You can't be you can't content Capitalism does not work on contentment. It's too
Nope.
slippery. You don't When you're content, you can't be had. And so I
Yeah.
think that's where we have to go. Like, if we're going to tap into this system and into the logics of whiteness, we also have to resign ourselves to discontentment. That is
Yeah.
why they
Mm.
can't sit still.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
if I'm going to get off the ride, in my personal life and in my work, I'm like, y'all, we can name these things without being tangled up in them. You know,
Mhm.
I really want to be free from whiteness. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm. And again, and I've talked about this a million times, but I really want to drive this home. When we talk about whiteness, we are not talking about white people. White people are individuals. Whiteness is the system that that keeps this country running. That's whiteness is a framework, a power framework, a structure that anybody can uphold. You don't have to be white to uphold whiteness. I mean, you go all the way back to slavery. There were black slave catchers. You look at people that are ICE agents right now, most of them are Latino. They're
Mhm.
upholding whiteness. It is an ideology. That is what whiteness is. And you have to be able and willing to break it down, no matter what side of the aisle on. But I'm really going to talk to progressives right now because y'all are the ones that are claiming that you want change. You have to be able to let go. I know we all did that look. Like, come on, progressives. Like, you also have to be able to decenter yourself and release yourself from the chains of whiteness in order to make this change happen. You have to abolish that as well, because progressives still benefit from whiteness, even though they're talking about liberation, even though they're talking about all this justice reform and whatever the case may be. You're still benefiting from it, especially if you're the leading voice a part of these movements that has never experienced it. That, you know what I mean? It's the
Yeah. I
whiteness that
mean,
is keeping you at the forefront.
yeah, that's the thing you got to let go of. It's devastating to, you got to let go of the crutches and learn how to
Mhm,
walk. You got to build
mhm.
muscle. And there's a lot of muscle that people who have been raised white, because you're right, whiteness is not an identity. It's a technology. It's a currency.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not, it's not an, I, that's why even in the hearings, I love that the senator went back and said, actually, you're getting into ethnic identity now. You're trying to defend
Mhm.
whiteness, right? There is a distinction here, and I love that they created that distinction because it's tethered to the capital, right? Like, you know, when Irish Americans and all of these folks come, Italian Americans come over here, they cut their last names off and they create a
Yep.
whole identity that is based in capital. So a lot of
Yeah.
times the reason people don't want to let go of um, this whole idea is the fear. It's the scarcity of, I don't know what exists on the other side of this. It's why the rich young ruler walks away,
Yeah.
because you can't see beyond the cliff, and there's really,
Yeah.
it's a death, so that means that there's really only one way to find out whether there's life after death. You can't like peek over, you have to
Mm-mm.
pass through it. Now you can see plenty of examples in the cosmos and in the people who have walked through it that there is life on the other side of whiteness, but people, no one can die for you. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to let go
Mhm,
and see what grows from that.
mm, mm. And I have grace for that. I know that it's hard because this is how you've grown up. Excuse me. This is what you've been taught. This is the system that was built that we're all a part of, right? It's not easy work. No one's saying that it's easy work, but it is necessary work if we actually want to have the type of world that we keep talking about. It has to be dismantled. It has to be.
And if you want it to be equal, because again,
Yes.
like like you're not, if, you know, I believe in like, really it's all one thing. Right? So I think for me that helps me think about, like, there's no way to be in competition with somebody who is of the same substance as me. If I'm coming from the
Mm.
same breath and the same
Mm,
earth as you, then competition how? We're the same thing. Like, we're just different manifestations of the same thing. And so
Mm.
folding back into that is when you get to equality. We come from the same source, so that's equality, which means that
yeah.
it will, you know, what is James, I think it's James, he's like, why are there quarrels among you? Right? Y'all are arguing amongst yourselves because you've tapped out of source. You have really started to believe that it's me against you. This is Cain
Mm,
and Abel.
yeah.
Right? You've gone the way of Cain.
Right.
You know, that is your brother. That's why you can't stand here without him. He's talking to me now. You know, there is this real sense where we've bought into separation and hierarchy and categories and caste. And we really believe it's true so much that I would sell you out so that I can rise higher. And we have to trust that going a different route would actually be better for everybody,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
But you got to
Yeah.
believe, in equality. You've got to believe it.
Yeah.
And know that it doesn't take anything away from you. Equal means equal. And that's all that we've ever been trying to say. Having equality does not mean taking something away from anybody else. And that's, I think, a very, very common misconception when people hear that word, is that they think they're going to lose something if people have the same access to the things that they have. It's like, no, it just means we're all going to have it. That's all that
Yeah.
it means. That's all it means.
They've just been so conditioned to believe that it's us against them. If we don't, it's
Sure.
so binary, right? There is
Absolutely.
It is.
no room for more than this system of things. And I just think, like,
Yeah.
I've been
That's so
thinking of a
good.
lot this week too, like the better we get at patriarchy, the better we get at this idea of whiteness that we're talking about here, the better we get at capitalism, the less room there is for humans to be human.
That's
Like,
right.
we get so much worse at humanity. And that's what's on the line here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because capitalism
Absolutely.
exists on not on people not being human. I mean, capitalism exists on chattel slavery, where you are
Mhm.
not a man and then you're 3/5 of a man so that I can get some votes. You know, like, y'all got this whole thing is it. The root of it is corrupt, right? It only
Yep.
exists to exploit human labor. That's capital.
Yeah.
So, like, people become units and they become you have transactional relationships. And I'm like, any vestige of that, which is to your point, Malynda, about progressives, like, they don't even realize the tentacles of this thing because they're just waking up to it. So any vestiges of that, right, is symptomatic of whiteness at work. And I'm saying, if you're going to lead people into the next thing, you really need to take some time and see how deep and intrinsic this goes. It's not about quoting Black people on the internet. It is really about examining how deep and how this manifests in all of the posturing and all of the stuff that is happening. I would love to see people who are progressives start to talk to people about their process of grieving an identity, right? Or their process of alchemizing the pain of realizing that I'm 30 something years old and I've been living a lie, and it's coming out in art and poetry so that the words can bring somebody else into that process. Because otherwise, y'all are repeating the same logics and it won't be helpful. And at some point, it
Yeah.
gets to be a little bit like irresponsible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the horseshoe theory. Just, you're going from one extreme to the next, and it's just they're matching on each
Yeah.
side. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's
I mean,
really easy to just, like, consume what's on Instagram, consume content that's made from very
sure.
wise people, like both of you, for example, both of your Substacks, but all of your content. Like, I hope everyone is consuming all of that. And at the same time, if that is all that we're doing, then where is the work happening?
Mhm.
So we need to consume it. We need to sit with it. I know that has been so true for me. My husband and I were just talking about this last night, about the black squares in 2020, right? Everybody put those on their Instagram. All the white women put them on their Instagram. And and that was a very, I think, wake up moment for a lot of white women who were like, because people called them out, because people said, this is not it, this is not the work. The work is not putting a black square on your Instagram. The work is learning the history. The work is understanding the system that you are still propping up with your support and
Mhm.
your actions, your words, and all of this. Do the work. And by the way, don't go ask a black woman, tell me what it is. Go read, go learn, go listen to people talking about it, go educate yourself. Don't depend on somebody else to tell you why what you're doing is wrong. Go figure it out. And then to
But
Tamice's
you
point,
know,
sit with it and grieve it and figure out, like, what does that mean for everything I'm doing now?
I love that. And I think there's two sides to that too, because I think in some ways, like, I think they should be learning from people. They should learn what it feels like to sit under the feet of people of color, because what that does
Yes.
internally, having to sit with that shift in power, to realize, this is what Tamika Mallory said once. She said, y'all should be glad that we don't want revenge. We want equality. Like,
Yes.
nobody, we don't want revenge. So
Yeah.
it's not about that. It's just leave us alone and figure your stuff out, right? So, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really that. So it's kind of a both and of, like, you could be learning from people who lived in a world that told them that they were that wouldn't let them read or write, which tried to rob them of the ability to communicate in this
Yeah.
place, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, but they
Mhm.
found a way to do it anyway. And natives knowing how to live in reciprocal relationship with the earth. This is not about consuming from people of color so that you can reposture yourself. This is
Hmm.
about sitting down and sitting down
Yeah. Yeah.
and and actually learning from the people who have the capability to teach at this in this moment, because their identities are fraught. Like, we did not have the luxury of being human or American, and here we are. So the wisdom of that can be received without being like exploited and extracted, right? Like,
Yeah.
it really is time. It's not about learning more so you can stay in power. It is actually like,
Right.
we have to shift the high. We have to shift. Jesus flipped tables, right? But the people of God are about to flip this whole thing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is y'all have to learn to be under the authority of people and find that it is okay to 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 not have all the power in the space. You've
Yeah.
got to learn how to sit with uncertainty, with
Yeah.
things you don't know and things you don't understand. And all of those things are actually, I can like see whiteness crumbling, because whiteness is about competency and competition, right? Because those things will make you
Mhm.
safe. So
Yeah.
what it really is you've really got to abandon your ego. It's ego death.
It's all ego
That's what this
driven. Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really
Every last
is.
bit of it. And I was gonna say, I love that quote when that Tamika said about, we don't want revenge, we just want equality. But they can't wrap their minds around us if we end up in the position of power, not returning the favor of what they did to
Mhm.
us. But that's not on our mind, and it has never been on our mind. Our mind, we've always been about progress. We've always been about uplifting communities. And again, and I know we talked about this before, Tamise, when we talked on Substack. I always think back to that black church that welcomed Dylan Roof with no questions, and then he took their lives.
Mm.
They didn't, there was nothing in their mind that would think he was coming in there to harm them, and they welcomed him with open arms, people of God. That to me really, really shows the difference between how black people and white people, whiteness, I should say, because it's not all white people, view each other. Because they welcomed him with open arms and he went and took their lives. That's the difference. We're not thinking about harming you. We just want to have the same access to everything that you all have been granted since the inception of this country. And it's never been about revenge. It has always been about equality and equity, and like you said, and just leaving us alone. Just leave us alone. That's all we want. We'll rock with you. We'll rock with the spicy white, as Joy Reid says. We love we love a spicy white person, but that's at the end of the day. That's just what it is. Like, just let people live in peace, but they don't know how to. The people that are completely overcome by whiteness, they don't know how to do that, and that's why we have to break it down.
Yeah.
That's
I
exactly
love the
right.
posts
That's
I've
so
been
good.
seeing lately about kind of the misconception of what matriarchy would be. Like it would be
Mm,
replacing men in power with women in power, and how the whole
mm,
point is like that's not what would happen because we don't want that. We don't want the higher. It would be care of the children, right? That's the thing that's at
sure.
the center. And I feel like it's the same idea that it is that projection is confession all over again. You don't want this because you're afraid you will lose the power because you think somebody else is going to take the power when that's not even what they're wanting. That's not even the goal. And I think just studying and reading about indigenous culture and learning about kinship and solidarity and the circular relationship like Tamise talked about with the earth and those things, I'm like, why wouldn't I want to live like that?
Yeah, yeah,
I want
yeah.
to live like that. I want this kinship and a community of care and a theology of care that is really about people and
Mm,
humanity and how do we live in solidarity, because that gets rid of all of these causes that we each need to stand for, and it brings us together because we are all equal and the same from the same source.
yeah,
It's not about
Yeah.
competition. It really is that circle of kinship.
I love that. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about some of the organizations that are doing some of this good work. I think we know abolition altogether is a very, very, very difficult thing to achieve, but reform is happening, and there are some great organizations that are doing that work. Equal Justice USA is an organization you all should be following. The Sentencing Project, they do research-driven advocacy addressing the racial disparities in incarceration, because if you didn't know, America incarcerates the most people per capita in the world. Again, Christian nation, they say, but they're always locking people up. And then Faith Leaders for Second Chances, and they mobilize clergy and congregations to support clean slate legislation, which I'm all for, record expungement and reentry programs rooted in redemption, which is really what
Yes.
faith leaders should be doing, helping people re-enter the world, specifically that have been incarcerated. But you want to have a system that props up people. You want to have a system that uplifts people, that helps them, that gives them grace, the right people grace, because I've been seeing a lot of wrong people get grace. That's
Mm.
probably a conversation for another podcast. But I do believe that this country has been so obsessed with punishment for the wrong
Mhm.
people in order to keep a hierarchy, right? And that's what we can start to try to reform and then hopefully eventually abolish. But I want to ask before we close, for you specifically, Tamice, if justice were to look like the Gospels in this country, how would it be reflected? How would that look?
Oh man, I think it's literally like everybody sitting under their own vine and fig tree, just neighboring. I really do. And I think when you can just be, you can be creative, you can be fruitful and multiply, right? And I don't think about that in terms of procreation. I'm thinking in terms of generativity. Like when you're at rest, you can generate and you can be creative and you can add to the world. So to me,
Mhm.
justice in place is people at rest,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
across sector of society, right? I think
Mhm.
that's what I think of. And I think then that whole penal idea, the penal, they borrow that stuff from Christianity. That's what I'm saying is all one thing. They borrow the justification for punishment from Christianity. And so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
going back to like, okay, so what does Christianity say about these things? And if that's going to be our meaning making apparatus, how do we bring some of those passages about justice and what happens when justice rolls down like a river? What does the world look like? I think
Yeah.
looking straight at those passages and then going, okay, what are my skill sets? How can I build that? That's what I
Yeah.
think of.
I love that. And Rebecca, you wrote a Substack not too long ago about decentering yourself. And I want you to share what one mindset shift was for you to get you to that point. Because I think that that's important. I know it takes time, it takes a lot of work, but it can start with really small steps with people learning how to decenter themselves in order to really do a lot of this work.
Ooh, yeah.
And a
That
big question
for
to
me
end on.
was, but it's to me was when I figured out that I wasn't at the center of the world, that really everything I was looking at was my worldview, and oh my goodness, everyone else has their own worldview, and what is happening to other people has nothing to do with me. I don't need to make it about me. I don't need to
Mhm.
feel like I am in any way in their story when they're telling me a story. So then I can just believe their story. I think that that was a big part of it, is that I didn't need to be in that category of good or bad in relation to their story. I'm not good or bad because I'm not in the story, number one. And people's experiences then can be something I can hear and I can sit with and not need to insert myself in, because it's not about me.
Yeah.
And once I figured that out, then my whole world really opened up, because other people's experience got to be at the center and not me all the time.
I love that. And I love that awareness. And I love that it takes time. But we got to give
Lots.
people grace in that sense. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, Dr. Tamice, you know I love you. Tell everyone where they can follow you and read your work and do all of the things. Do the spiel. Do the plug.
Okay, so I wrote a book called Faith Unleavened: The Wilderness Between Trayvon Martin and George Floyd, and that's already out. And then I host a podcast called the Black Modern Mystic Podcast, and that's on YouTube. Other than that, I'm just here trying to preach what I practice. So I'm trying to slow down a little bit. That's
I
it.
love that. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you
Yes, thank
out
you.
there listening, yes, 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 to Advocacy Hour, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you join TNE Connected. You can get all of our free resources and take our educational courses and have community spaces. Go to newevangelicals.com/connect. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.